Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, your host. The mission of Awake to Oneness Radio is to inspire the world to awaken to the universal truth of oneness. Science is teaching us that all life is interconnected, that we are all one. And ancient wisdom and spirituality has been teaching us this for eons. What you do to another person, you're literally doing to another aspect of yourself. And when mankind awakens to the universal truth of oneness, there will be peace on earth. Today's show topic is Heal and Help Others Heal with Dr. Michael Gaeta. We'd like to welcome Michael Gaeta to Awake to Oneness Radio. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me today.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being my guest. I met Dr. Michael when I was producing. I work with Humanities Team. I've been working with Humanities Team now for about a year now. It'll be a year, May 1st, so almost my anniversary. I love working with Humanities Team. My mission with Awake to Oneness Radio and Humanities Team, we have the exact same mission, which is to awaken the world to the universal truth of oneness. And I've been producing webinars for Humanities Team this year, and I met Dr. Michael when he was a guest for a webinar for Humanities Team. And in producing that webinar, I was just listening to you, and I was like, oh, my goodness, I'm in such alignment. Everything you were saying, it's like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I must invite him to be a guest on our show, and he agreed, and he's with us tonight. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so glad to be here.
Well, thank you. Can you share with our listeners, your journey, how you got to do the work that you're doing? You're doing some amazing work in the holistic health field. But can you kind of start, give a brief history, or a detailed history, how much of a history you like to give to our listeners so they can get an idea of who you are?
Thanks, Carol, and I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with you and your listeners and have a conversation together. I had a long interest since I was an adolescent, actually, to do something that made a difference in people's lives for the better. And my first career was actually in music. I played the piano and realized that there was more specific healing work I wanted to do. And this all happened after, in my adolescence, went through a pretty dark time in my life where I was really quite depressed and unhappy and, really considered checking out. Like if this was life, I didn't want any part of it. And from the blessing of mentors and I think some divine intervention in some ways and books and, different helpers along the way, decided to stick around and do everything I could to make a positive contribution in the world. And that led me to, begin my healing arts practice 27 years ago. And I practice acupuncture and nutrition and herbal medicine and natural functional medicine and bodywork therapy. And so that really, the healing work kind of came out of a spiritual awakening, which which was a difficult time, but I'm thankful for it because it got me to the place where I realized that life was much larger and that I was much larger and that my purpose in life was much larger than I had imagined previously. And so this kind of dark night of the soul forged in me a desire to do everything I could to be a positive healing presence in the world. And then that led to my healing arts practice, and then in recent years, my full-time vocation, my calling is teaching and training other health professionals to improve their patient care and practice success.
Oh, that's beautiful. Like I said, in listening to you speak for HT's webinar, I was so in alignment, and we're in alignment again. I teach piano. I don't play much anymore.
Wonderful.
I haven't
That's
played.
great.
I used to play many years ago. I haven't really sat and played in many years, but I've been teaching for over 25 years. I teach students from the age of 4 to 16, and I love it. I love teaching
that's
piano.
Great.
See, so we have more in common. And then you also mentioned that dark night of the soul, wondering why you're, feeling like you didn't want to be here. And many of my listeners are already aware of the fact that my son transitioned almost 3 years ago now. It'll be 3 years in July. But 3 years before his transition, I did try to take my life because 3 years before he transitioned, doctors told me he wasn't going to live. And he was on life support. They asked me, could they take him off? I said no. Right. But after they said, he's not going to make it. This was just after his 27th birthday. They wanted to take him off life support. I said no. Then I proceeded to go upstairs on a different floor to a small, quiet waiting room, and I took a bottle of sleeping pills. I wrote a note saying, I'm not going to bury my son is going to bury me. And from that, it was Christmas of 2011. It was around Christmas. It was December of 2011. The hospital was on 34th Street. I experienced a miracle on 34th Street that Christmas. He took himself a week after the doctor said he wasn't going to live. He took himself off of life support. He pulled out the ventilator, and he pulled out the feeding tube, and he was perfectly fine. The doctors, it was a true miracle. And he and I both went home to celebrate New Year's together.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Amazing.
Wow. So yes, so definitely. But he did transition 3 years after that. But experiencing that miracle that I experienced December 2011, I said to God, I'll never stop thanking you. I didn't. When he went back into the hospital 3 years later, I said, thank you, God. I don't know what's going to happen this time. I don't know if I'm going to bring him home, but just thank you for that miracle. And I think that's part of my awakening, is just being thankful for experiencing that miracle and just going on from there. I was actually awakened to the truth of oneness before that. I was awakened to the truth of oneness in 2007 from watching What the Bleep.
Oh, sure.
Wonderful. Quantum physics. Yes, quantum physics is what woke me up to truth of oneness. So, but I know that you spent some time working with Marianne Williamson.
Yes.
Can you share that with us?
Yeah, this was, I came into high school. I went through my first kind of suicidal phase in 8th grade. And I was sitting in despair in my room, my bedroom that I shared with my two brothers, and I was just in this very despairing place. And a single book, dislodged itself from the top shelf of the bookcase and fell on my head. And there was no earthquake. There was no earthquake. There was no. This is New York City. There was. It was just a single book came off the top shelf and landed on the front, the top of my head. And it was Wayne Dyer's Your Erroneous Zones, and which had just come out not too long before that. And I said, oh, I guess I should read this. And that book really helped pull me through that time. Very simple concepts, I think we would consider, today, those of us who are, living a conscious path, about guilt and worry and things like that. But it was just what I needed. They were new ideas for me and at that time. And that got me through 8th grade and into high school, where I met a guidance counselor who, and this was a Catholic all-boys high school in New York City, Archbishop Malloy, wonderful school. and at the time was an all-boys school. It's co-ed now. And I met a guidance counselor there who was, such an angel and a godsend, and taught me that, as he sometimes said, that God doesn't make junk. You are lovable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he really helped me have some self-esteem, which I really didn't have at the time. And he turned me on to this, and he was a Catholic brother in the religious order, and he started turning me on to this, for a Catholic brother to turn me on to Edgar Casey and channeled material and Course in Miracles and all this kind of stuff.
Great.
And it was quite amazing. And I was voraciously reading this stuff because my mentor, he was definitely a mentor for me for many years until he passed, was recommending these, and I was just devouring this. He says, I'm going to a lecture on Thursday, would you like to come? And of course the answer was yes. And this is the fall of 1989, and it was Marianne Williamson lecturing on A Course in Miracles in Manhattan. And immediately I was like, this is where I belong. This is wonderful. And I wanted more, and I wanted to help out, and I was so full of life and joy and connection with people and her teachings. And I said, I want to help out. What can I do to help out? And they said, oh, sure, you can volunteer, as a volunteer at an upcoming lecture. And so I just did. That was kind of Guy Friday, as they used to say, like whatever needed to be done, move boxes, run the tape table, run the book table, whatever needed to be done. Get Miriam some water. And I did that. And they said, we really appreciate your enthusiasm. We'd like to hire you to do more. We want to give you more responsibility for helping, set up and run the lectures. And I said, anything I can do, I'm happy to. So at the age of 19 or 20, I started working, for Marianne, and this whole, cycle with her lasted 3 years, and with her New York lectures. This was before she was all famous and published her first book, A Return to Love. And the great blessing was, she was really a mentor for me, even though she was just in New York once or twice a month, that I got to see how she was with people, and I got to see how she was as a person, as well as her public, brilliant lecturer and spiritual teacher persona that I got to do, see from the lectures. And so she was really an example for me of what it meant to be, to provide like servant leadership, and to have, a definite degree of commitment to excellence and treating people well and having great personal integrity and great personal generosity. And so, she really, was a mentor for me for those 3 years. And even though we didn't spend a lot of time together, I got to see her a bit in the dressing room and and just, she was very generous with her staff and took us out to lunch. And we just got to know her a bit as a person, and she really took an interest. And, when she was talking to you, you just got the feeling there was nobody else in the world. It was just you and her. Like, she just had that kind of presence and attention. And so, and she inspired me to become a professional speaker. And I remember she was giving a lecture one day, and I said, I think I can do that, what she's doing. And then, some months later, I said, I think I want to do that. And then, some months passed, and there she was again giving a lecture, and there I was, kind of watching her. And I said, I will do that. That's what I'm called to do, is in some way to do what she's doing. And that helped, become an inspiration for me to start teaching. Now it's 24 years ago. And it was 1993, 4 years later, from when I first met her, that I started teaching. And I studied Course in Miracles very seriously for 12 years. It'll always be part of the fabric of who I am, very thankfully so. And, she was really my second mentor after, Brother Ron, the Marist brother, who helped pull me through that dark time and taught me that I was a worthwhile person. So I'm very blessed, and I can really thank the mentors that I've had over the years for, being where I am today.
Wow, wonderful. Yes, Marianne Williamson has been a guest on my show with her latest book that she released last year. Around this time last year, she was my guest. So yes,
wonderful.
And I'm not far from New York, and I keep saying I am going to go because she lectures every Tuesday night in New York, and I keep saying one of these Tuesdays, but I teach on Tuesday. I teach piano Tuesday, so I have to take a day off from teaching to go.
Yeah, that'd be worthwhile.
But it will be worth it. So I'll probably do
sure.
it in the summer because I don't teach as much in the summer. So
yeah. Well, please send her my regards.
I will.
In case you happen to speak with her,
Oh, yes. I'm sure I will because we had, when she was on the show, we had a wonderful conversation, and I know I want to get her to sign my book, so I know
sure.
she'll remember me, and I'll mention you.
Yeah, send her my love, please.
I will. Okay, so you've had two wonderful mentors, and the wonderful thing, I did go to Catholic school too,
sure.
But I didn't have a mentor in Catholic school. Matter of fact, I was in Catholic school in the 60s, in the mid to late 60s, and it was my parents raised us. Children are to be seen and not heard, and I had a question about religion, just keep it to yourself. It was not to, and there was no one from Catholic school that I remember teaching things of Eckhart Tolle or maybe it wasn't. Yes, those metaphysical teachings I definitely could not find in the Catholic upbringing I had.
Sure.
But that's wonderful that you had that.
Yeah, I'm very thankful, for all of those years, in Catholic school. It really helped give me a good, working knowledge of the Bible and the wisdom that was there, And I met my first mentor who helped me through a particularly dark time. So, and it was kind of a rite of passage for me to Carol. He passed away from liver cancer in 1993, and that was the first person who was really close to me that had died. And so it was definitely a rite of passage, just to, be with him through that process. And it also kind of forged a desire in me, even though I had just started practicing a few years before, to get really good at helping people prevent cancer and to support cancer patients naturally with whatever, their process was to increase their healing capacity and quality of life.
Right. So you began teaching, you said, in 93, and I know that you do seminars all over the country. Can you share with our listeners a little bit on, because I know you went into a lot of different topics, like vaccinations and all that. Can you share with our listeners? Thank you.
Yeah, you mean the teaching?
Yes, your teaching.
Most of my life I've devoted now full-time to training other natural healthcare professionals, people like me who are acupuncturists or chiropractors or naturopaths or holistic physicians, nutritionists, to improve their patient care and also the success of their practice so they can bring their gifts into the world and be very effective clinically in helping people get well, stay well, help them on their path of growth and healing and evolution, and also to help them, on the business side so they can have successful practices. So that's that's what I do full time. I still practice part time, working with people here in Boulder, and also working with patients remotely by phone and video as well. But my full time life is as teaching.
Okay, and share a little bit, because you really gave a lot of good information about vaccinations when you were on the program I was producing with Humanities Team. Can you go into some detail about vaccinations?
Yeah, it was something, I was born in 1969 and got all my shots, which at the time was about 6 or 8 shots. Today it's 52 shots, delivering close to 70 vaccines within the first 6 years of life. So the vaccine schedule has really exploded. If a person follows the recommended CDC schedule for getting fully vaccinated according to the recommended schedule, a person by the age of 75 will have had 166 vaccines, in their life, according to the standard schedule. I'm sorry, it's 141 vaccines. 141 shots delivering 169 vaccines by age 75. And a lot of that comes by age, by the time they reach their 19th birthday, they will have gotten 66 shots, delivering 84 individual doses of vaccines. And so the vaccine schedule has exploded since the late 80s and early 90s because vaccines are there's the only other product in the world where manufacturers are exempt from harm done by the products they produce are firearms. Other than that, the only products where the manufacturer is exempt from all liability for any harm done by that product is vaccines. And so, since the manufacturers, starting in the late 80s, suddenly had no incentive to produce safe vaccines, and it was basically an unlimited cash cow, protected by the government, mandated by the government. All kinds of vaccines, dozens of new vaccines have been introduced, and there are 300 new vaccines, or 276 to be exact, that are in development. Since now the vaccine manufacturers, these drug companies, have zero incentive. They get to produce as many products as they want, hurt as many people as get hurt, and they have no liability. And so this is quite unique. And so when I started practicing 27 years ago, it was about a couple of years in, about 25 years ago, that I started treating children in my practice with nutrition and lifestyle counseling and diet. And one day a mother brought in her 2-year-old boy, her 2-year-old son, and he had a whole range of health issues. He had regressed developmentally, mentally. He had neurological problems. He stopped interacting. He stopped have eye contact, and he kind of regressed. And what we would call today autism spectrum. And he had asthma and eczema and all these other issues, digestive problems. And I asked the mother, when did this start? And I had never asked this question before because I was raised with all my shots, and vaccines are great, and they saved humanity, and they're really important for preventing disease. I was taught all these things and, had no reason to question this at the time. And I asked this mother who brought in her son, I said, this is just intuition. I just came out of my mouth. I said, when did these symptoms start related to his vaccines? And not thinking that there was any relationship between the two. And she paused and thought about it, and her face just, this look of surprise. She said, I hadn't thought about it. Most of these, almost all of his symptoms started within days or weeks of his receiving his shots, and some of the symptoms started, like his developmental regression started like within hours of his 2-year shots. I said, that's interesting. I'm sure that was a coincidence. And then, which is what the pediatricians say these days, everything is a coincidence. And then, some weeks later, another mother brought her child in, and I asked the same question, and this started becoming a pattern, where usually it's the mother bringing in the child, and 90% of the time, they reported that their child's symptoms, whether it was asthma, eczema, autism spectrum, developmental delay, developmental regression, digestive disorders, inflammatory bowel disease, all these sorts of things started within hours or days of a vaccine visit, which is ironically called a well baby visit. And I said, this is really bizarre. Like, most of the children I'm treating in this holistic practice appear to have been injured by vaccines because there was a definite relationship between when the vaccines were given and the onset of these diseases. And I said, well, I better look into this. And I was amazed at what I found because it was the opposite of what I had been told by the pediatricians and the internists and physicians and the government and the media. We're all saying the same thing. The vaccines were entirely safe. They were completely effective and absolutely necessary, that they saved humanity from the plagues of these epidemics. And I looked at the actual evidence, the actual science, the actual literature, the actual historical evidence, and found out that none of this was actually true, and that vaccines had enormous risks and documented evidence of harm in some children, not all of them, but in many children, much more than we've been told. And so I kept going deeper and deeper, and over the years I spent thousands and thousands and thousands of hours reading and listening and reading and listening, books, articles, videos, from very, very credible authorities and very, very credible medical journals, and just been completely appalled at how overstated the benefits are of vaccines and how understated the risks and harm are. And so having spent, many, many thousands of hours over 25 years, I've come to a very clear conclusion based on the evidence that vaccines do much more harm than good. Now, do they prevent some mild, non-dangerous, non-life-threatening, immune-building infections? Sure. They can suppress and prevent a few mild immune-building infections, sure. Measles and chickenpox and very mellow, self-limiting conditions. But the amount of harm they do is enormous. And I've come to the conclusion, because I had read this, reading pediatricians and more holistically oriented folks who have, kind of bucked the system and read for themselves, educated themselves, not just believe the party line propaganda, that the single greatest cause of childhood illness is vaccines. By far, the greatest cause of all childhood disease, whether it's type 1 diabetes, whether it's asthma, eczema, inflammatory bowel disease, autism spectrum disorder. There's literally hundreds of conditions that we could categorize as vaccine injury. And we know this from now hundreds of thousands of parents who know their children better than any doctor ever could, who know their children intimately. And, you've had children, when babies are little, you know everything about them. And every little thing that happens, every subtle change, you're aware of it because they're your child. And I have two children of my own, and who are 8 and 12. And, you know everything about your kid, and you just intuitively know and you observationally know. Now we have hundreds of thousands of parents who know that their child was not the same after they were vaccinated at the 2-month, 4-month, 6-month, 2-year visits. One of those visits injured their child, and they were never the same after that. And so, yes, do vaccines suppress mild infections? Sure, but the amount of harm they cause is enormous. And so, now I've been lecturing nationally for 14 years on vaccines, and my message is that vaccines should be voluntary, that the myth, now we have a growing body of pro-vaccine extremists who would force unlimited vaccines on the entire population, starting with the children, without choice, without informed voluntary consent, without parental rights, no personal bodily sovereignty, no exemptions, no informed consent, unlimited vaccines based on the myth that vaccines produce herd immunity, which is a myth. It's been completely disproven. It's impossible. It's medically impossible that vaccines produce herd immunity. And it's this myth, this propaganda, this fabrication, this lie, this hoax, that is the justification for unlimited forced vaccination. So you have some real extremists who would eliminate choice, who would eliminate parental rights, who would eliminate informed consent, which is the bedrock of medical ethics. And I've taught medical ethics nationally for 22 years. I know medical ethics really well. I've studied and taught this subject for a long time. The core principle is informed consent. The person's informed, and then they get a voluntary choice without coercion. That's informed consent. And that's been eliminated now with vaccines, based on the myth that your vaccination protects somebody else, and that if you don't vaccinate, you're going to endanger somebody else. This is a lie.
Right.
But it's the lie that's the justification for forced vaccination and the elimination of healthcare freedom of choice, the elimination of informed consent, the elimination of even personal bodily sovereignty, that you have a right to decide what happens with your body. Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court ruled that a woman has a right to decide what happens with her body. And with abortion, which I'm not making a statement about abortion, pro or con, not at all. I'm not taking a stand here. I'm just saying the Supreme Court guaranteed a woman's right to her own bodily sovereignty, but now they want to take that away when a woman has to make a choice about vaccines for herself and for her child, and that's wrong. And so we're facing the greatest health care. We're facing the greatest crisis we've ever had of healthcare ethics. And the historical fact is that vaccines, when it comes to smallpox and polio and measles and diphtheria and pertussis, when it comes to every epidemic that ever was, no vaccine ever eliminated any epidemic at any time in human history. That's a lie, that it did. And the truth is that every epidemic, without exception, was well into its decline before the vaccines were even available. And then in the case of smallpox, the worst smallpox epidemics were in the vaccinated communities. They had the most smallpox and the most deaths from smallpox where they were the most intensively vaccinated. And we had the least smallpox incidents and the least death from smallpox in communities who chose not to vaccinate and chose instead to quarantine. And so this is historical fact. And I would encourage all of your listeners to get a book called Dissolving Illusions, which is a medical history book. It's a book of medical history, facts, related to smallpox, related to polio, which had nothing to do with the polio virus. It had to do with spraying DDT all over our children in our communities in the early half of the 1900s. So it had, very few cases of polio had anything to do with the polio virus. And the polio vaccine had nothing to do with the elimination of the polio epidemic. And so these are myths. They're fairy tales concocted to scare people into accepting these very dangerous drugs, which are not even classified as drugs. Did you know that vaccines are not classified as drugs? And so they're exempt. They're exempt from the requirements of safety testing that every other drug is subject to. They're exempt from even proving effectiveness in the way that every other drug is. So vaccines get to be approved without safety testing. That's required for all other drugs. And vaccines are approved without even the requirement that they work in the way that all other drugs are required to be proven effective. And so, this is the greatest evil, the greatest hoax, the greatest scam of modern medicine, based on the lie that vaccines saved humanity and that they've saved us from all these plagues of epidemics. It's all fairy tales concocted by the CDC and the drug companies. The CDC is a vaccine company itself. The CDC owns dozens of vaccine patents, which sell $5 to $6 billion in vaccines per year, are from CDC-owned vaccines. And so, this is an enormous hoax, an enormous scam. And I've never told, I've treated thousands and thousands of patients over 27 years. I've never told a parent not to vaccinate their kids. What I have said is, this is what I've done with my own children who are completely unvaccinated and are, of course, among the healthiest kids in the community as a result. And I've just told them this is my choice and why. And before I had kids, I said, when I have kids, they're not going to be vaccinated, and here's why. But you have to make your own decision. I'm not going to tell you what to do. But we need to expand, not eliminate. We need to expand parental rights and freedom of choice, not eliminate it. Based on the myth of herd immunity, we need to expand parental rights and informed consent and vaccine choice because they carry risks, real dangers and risks. And I've seen it in my practice. My colleagues have seen it in practice. It's documented in the medical literature. In certain children, they are harmed by vaccines. And just looking at autism, which is only one small piece of the pie of vaccine injury, the scientists at MIT did the statistical modeling and have proven that within 15 years, half of all children in the United States, within 15 or 20 years, will be autistic. Half the children in the country will be autistic, including 80% of the boys. And vaccines are not the only cause, but they're the biggest cause. And we know this. It's in the science. It's in the literature of how vaccine ingredients directly cause autism in susceptible children. And so we have this one-size-fits-all vaccine schedule, which is not individualized according to risk stratification, according to individual physiology and biochemical differences, according to family history, according to genetics, according to all these factors which have a role to play. Everywhere else in medicine, there's individualized treatment, except vaccines.
Right.
They're presumed to be safe, they're presumed to be effective, they're presumed to be necessary, without evidence, by the way, without objective, credible, independent science to prove any of this. And they're forced on the population on a one-size-fits-all schedule. That doesn't happen anywhere else in medicine. A 2-pound preemie gets the same vaccine schedule as a full-term 10-pound baby. This doesn't happen anywhere else in medicine. And more and more studies are coming out comparing vaccinated to unvaccinated kids, and the healthiest kids are the unvaccinated, the sickest kids are the fully vaccinated. That's what the objective science is telling us. And this is not what the media is telling us, because the media is controlled by the drug companies, because the drug companies, through direct-to-consumer advertising, give the drug companies $6 billion a year in advertising revenues. And so they're the biggest advertiser in mainstream media. So if you're reading USA Today, if you're listening to CNN, if you're reading Time Magazine, you're reading the New York Times, all of these publications and media outlets are out of business tomorrow, if not for drug money. And so they'll never or rarely publish any stories that are critical of vaccines, because they don't want to annoy their biggest advertiser. Anderson Cooper is out of a job, if not for drug money. And he's not the only one, obviously. It's just an example. But all these mainstream media celebrities are out of a job, if not for drug money. And so they never or rarely will put out any story which is balanced about vaccine risks and dangers and choice. So this is the situation we're in, thankfully, and I'm a very positive, hopeful person. Evil destroys itself eventually, because it's not connected to oneness, it's not connected to cosmic being or source. And so evil will destroy itself eventually. And people are waking up. They're waking up and they're getting active to take a stand, not against vaccines, but for choice.
The wonderful thing in the day and time that we're living in now is the Internet, and shows like this one. This podcast will be available around the world for anybody to listen to. So the Internet is connecting everybody, and that is a way to get what is actually happening, not through mainstream media. I unplugged from mainstream media in 2001.
Great.
September 9/11, right after 9/11.
Yep.
Spirit told me, and I didn't, not audibly, but within me, Spirit said, turn off that news and don't ever turn it back on. And at that time, I didn't know why. I just was obedient. I have not watched news since 9/11, and I get all the news I need to know about comes to me, but also I'm not being brainwashed by mainstream media, like you were just talking about. You know, so it's so true.
Well, that's wise,
now,
Carol, you know, and because as you know, the media is based in fear. You know, if it bleeds, it leads, as the old saying goes. If it bleeds, it leads. You know, it's the lead story if it's some tragedy or something that creates more fear. And so as the world is waking up to oneness, which is another word for love, then we must consciously use our conscious minds, and you know this, and you've been teaching this, I'm sure, in this radio program, that people need to consciously turn away from fear and the thought forms of fear, the habits of fear, and separation, that I'm separate from you, we're separate from the earth, we're separate from the Creator by whatever name called, you know, universal, loving, cosmic intelligence. You know, anything that tells us we're separate from whatever is a lie. And so as we turn away from fear and turn towards love, then, you know, we begin to think thoughts that are creative and actually create a new world. And so, you know, this is the message of the day, is to, you know, my son was born in 2004, and it was in 2005 that I threw out our TV, and that was the end of it. You know, we haven't had a television since then. We canceled our New York Times subscription, and you know, and started, you know, and just it's like a digital detox, you know, of detoxifying our minds from the lies, you know, like of the world, which says that, you know, the world is falling apart and that there's so much evil in the world. Well, that's not really true. You know, there's much more. You know, if you could stand, you know, if you could kind of be in space and see all the light and all the darkness in the world, the kindness and the violence,
the love,
and the love, you'd see, you know, the vast majority. You know, there's a million acts of kindness for every act of violence. You know, there's so much more light in the world and in people and between people. But the media is, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. You know, it only tells us about that small percentage of darkness and violence, and to create more fear, and, you know, to have a weakened population. That we just, you know, we're taught how weak we are and how terrible the darkness is, instead of the truth, which is that we're incredibly powerful, and there's far more light in the world than darkness.
This is so true. This is and this is exactly mainstream media's job, is to feed us this negativity, this fear, because the only way we give away our power is when we're in a state of fear, and the quote-unquote, the powers that be want to be able to control the masses by keeping them in a state of fear. And this is so obvious now, and it's so, the wonderful thing is I got my education to like I said, from what the bleep woke me up. But once I was awakened, I was on YouTube. I lived on YouTube. I was probably, you know, Wayne Dyer, you name it, Greg Braden. Because I love the spiritual and the science. And I couldn't get enough of it. I just lived on YouTube. I didn't throw out my TV because I still have Netflix, but I don't have any. I don't have any commercial television. Just occasionally, I like to watch a documentary on Netflix.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's so true. And the wonderful thing is the day and age that we're living in right now, because I truly feel things speeding up. People are awakening. I mean, I'm able to do this show from my home office, you know, and it reaches thousands, you know, around the world. You couldn't do that, you know, 10 years ago, you know.
That's
So things are really speeding up. people are awakening. And no mainstream media wants you to think that, oh my goodness, my mom. I just thought about my mom, my dear mom, who transitioned in 2011. But her favorite saying was, "The world is going to hell in a handbasket." That was her favorite saying. But that's not true.
No, the world's going to heaven. Or is being translated into heaven. The Course in Miracles says the end of the world is not its destruction, but its translation into heaven. And so this idea that heaven and hell are something that happens after we die is that bizarre idea is being replaced by heaven and hell is our present experience of separation and fear, or oneness and love.
So true. And we're creating it right. We are creating our heaven right here and now.
Yeah.
Or we're creating our hell right here. It's our choice. It's free will.
Absolutely.
We're all divine light, and we all have the free will to create heaven or hell right here in this now moment. Because in truth, one of my favorite books is Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. Knowing that truly is just now. That's all there is. Everything is happening in this now moment. And when you really embrace and love what is, you understand that I have not studied A Course in Miracles, but I have had many, many guests that have studied the Course in Miracles, and I'm in total alignment with everything I've heard from my guests that have studied the Course in Miracles. But it talks about that we have never left heaven. We're in heaven right now. But if you want to create your own hell, you have your own you're a divine aspect of God, and that's your free will. Okay, go ahead, create your own hell. But mass media will try to keep you thinking that, oh my goodness, what is happening with the world when the opposite is truly happening. People are waking up.
That's so true, Carol. I had the privilege of publishing a book written by one of the top media ethicists in the world, Dr. Tom Cooper at Emerson College. And the name of the book is Fast Media, Media Fast. And it's available on Amazon. It's available at gaetapress.com. But Fast Media, Media Fast is one of the many themes of the book is how media can potentially pull us away from being creators and just being consumers. And that in a consciously lived life doesn't mean we don't have our computers and our smartphones and what have you, but we don't allow them to take over our lives to the point where we stop being creators and forget that we are creator beings. And then we just reduce ourselves to just being consumers of media rather than creators of our world.
Yes, so true. So very true, because you can just nowadays, even with Netflix, I could sit there and binge watch television.
Oh, sure.
On
Oh,
Saturday.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and I enjoy, a couple of things on Netflix and here and there and all of that. It's enjoyable, little escape or just entertainment, But I know that I was put on Earth to be a creator, and that I find my fulfillment, not just a fun distraction, but I find my meaning and fulfillment in life when I create and when I serve the whole, when I serve something larger than myself, and help others find their fulfillment.
That is so true. And when I brought up the thought of these video games that society in general is bringing up their children on these crazy violent. You wonder why society is violent. Have you watched these video games that the kids are just addicted to? It's just so, it's not when they should be outside playing, throwing a ball, running and jumping, and not in front of a video game. With
practicing killing.
Yes. And even in cartoons, look at all the violence.
Sure.
I have a 6-year-old grandson, and when he comes, Mima, He's like, he knows he can. He's got a, when he's watching television on Netflix, it's like, no, he'll always say, Mima has no violence in it, because he knows I won't allow him to watch anything with violence. And you would think, oh, that looks innocent, and then you actually watch a cartoon, and there's like some form of violence in it. It's like, and this is what we're feeding our children, our babies,
and they're the future. Absolutely.
Yes, and then you wonder why society is violent. It's all connected. We're all
That's right.
one.
In Dr. Cooper's book, he points out that by age 18, the average American child has witnessed 200,000 acts of violence, and on a screen. But to a young child, there's no difference. The young child's brain does not distinguish between a screen and reality. It is real to the young child, and so it's remarkable. And now, you know, the science is confirming what we've known common sense for a long time, that violent behavior is far more common. Like, we know now that media consumption, video games, all this virtual experience of violence, definitely, we know the science is irrefutably clear, and it's suppressed in the American media, of course, because video games are one of the most profitable industries in the world, along with the drug industry is probably the most profitable. But because it's such a profitable industry, that the truth is never put out, that we know, the science is clear, that screen exposure and video game exposure creates violent behavior towards oneself and others.
So true, so true. And it's so true that mass media is really trying, but I do believe that from all indications that we have really globally turned the corner, where mass media is losing. You know, because
I would agree.
So many people have access to other alternative media.
That's right.
Have access to the internet, have access to wonderful shows and wonderful books, and so people are slowly but surely waking up, and that's why I named this show "Wake to Oneness," because to me, oneness is the key. That's what when I understood the truth about oneness, that we're all one, we're all connected, we're not separate from God. You know, we are all a part of God, and we will always be a part of God, and we can never be separated from God, and we're all a part of each other. And what I do to you, I'm literally doing to myself. That really resonated for me. It wasn't just an intellectual level, it was a heartfelt level, and I knew it as truth. It just changed my life. And I know as people awake to that simple truth of oneness, to me, like you said, oneness, love, God, all those words are interchangeable. They're the same thing. God is oneness, God is love. You know, God, and we're all connected to that. We're not separate. And
indeed,
when people awaken to that, and we will, and I do see it. I don't know, I can't put a year on it, but there will be a time. There will be a time when mankind will know that we're one, and when that happens, there will be peace on this earth. There will be.
And you know, and I don't think we have like unlimited time to do that, and I also know that it doesn't take a majority. It just takes an awake or conscious minority, and that's the whole 100th monkey principle. That it was only about 11% of the monkeys of this particular species started washing their fruit before they ate it. When overnight, all the monkeys on all the islands, so there was no direct observation, started washing their fruit. Because, so it was about 11%. And who knows if that's the exact number, but it doesn't take, you know, a majority. And I remember I was working with a patient of mine I've been working with now for 25 years now. And many years ago, he came in one night, and he was really upset. And I was like, oh, what's wrong? He said, I just hate my job. I just don't like this company. It's a negative place to work. I dread going in there every day. Even though the money's good, I think I'm going to quit because it's just not worth it. And, people are just mean to each other, and they're backstabbing and talking about each other's back and undercutting each other and tearing each other down, and it's just such a negative environment. I think I'm going to quit. This isn't worth it. The money isn't worth it. It's just such a negative environment to be in. And I said, okay, would you be up for doing an experiment, just for a couple of weeks till I see you again? He said, sure.
Right.
I said, when you go back to work, just focus on being kind and appropriately loving to whoever you interact with, and not be attached to how they respond. They don't have to do it back or be kind back, or you're not doing it for a particular result. You're just doing it to show up differently. Just show up differently at work, regardless of what anybody else does. You're going to bring something of a positive, loving kindness into your own interactions with whoever you interact with, and not have any concern with the results. As a teacher of mine used to say, let love radiate without concern for results.
Right.
I said, just try it, just for 2 weeks, and just see what happens. You're going to quit anyway. Let's just do this for a couple of weeks. He said, sure. He comes back in 2 weeks. I said, how you doing? He said, something changed. I said, what changed? I said, what happened? He said, I'm having a different experience. He said, people are still mean to each other, but I'm having a different experience. I'm not as stressed. I'm not as bothered by what other people are doing to each other, and even if they're being mean to me, I'm just not as bothered about it. He says, I'm just focusing on, being more of a loving, patient, compassionate, kind person. I said, that's awesome. I said, wow, that's great. That's amazing. I said, would you be up for continuing the experiment for another couple of weeks till I see you again, since you're going to quit anyway? Would you mind just doing the experiment for a couple more weeks? He said, sure. I'm having a different experience now.
Right.
The company's the same, but I'm having. I said, great. So he comes back in 2 weeks. He says, something amazing has happened. I said, what happened? At work. He said, people are starting to treat me differently. I said, really? He said, yeah. I didn't ask. I didn't, demand that they treat me differently. I said, they're just naturally being more kind and positive and just towards me. They're still tearing each other up, but they're being nicer to me.
Right.
He said, it's amazing that people are treating me differently. I didn't do anything to force that or ask that or demand that. He said, I'm just doing my thing. I said, that's amazing. And I said, would you be up for continuing the experiment for another couple of weeks? And he said, sure. This is starting to get fun.
Right.
So he comes back in 2 weeks, and he sat down and I said, how's it going at work? And he started crying, tears were coming up in his eyes. I said, oh my God, what happened? And he said, Michael, now people are treating each other differently, including people I have no interaction with. People in different departments, on different floors, because his technology company in Manhattan took up 3 floors of this office building. And occasionally he'd have to deliver something, or usually he was on his floor, but occasionally go to a different floor. And he said, I can't believe it. People are treating each other differently. Even people I don't even know who they are. I've never met them. They're not in my department. I have no interaction with them. I've never even met them before. But I'm just standing there watching how people are treating each other. And he's crying. Now, tears flowing down his face. He said, Michael, did I do that? And I said, yes. I said, yes, you did. And he said, because you chose to show up differently, consistently. Now it's been 6 weeks. He said, the entire company has changed. The whole culture, the feeling of being there has changed. And he said, I don't want to quit. He said, I'm having a totally different experience, and now other people are too.
Yes.
And he was just blown away. He said his simple job, day by day, was to let love radiate in whatever way it seemed appropriate, without concern for results. Yes. And in this 300-person company, changed within less than 2 months.
Wow.
And within a few months later, he got a promotion, got a much higher paying job, doing something in a different department. He was really challenged and loved it, and wow. And I think it was a people department. He went from being a trainer to being like in HR, where he was like talking to people all the time about their experience and whatever it was.
Right.
And he stayed on another, I think, 7 years. And just from what he chose to do himself, just showing up differently, it became like one of the best places to work in Manhattan.
Wow.
And the whole culture had changed. And I say this because, you know, I know you live from this place, Carol, and I'm sure your listeners do, but it's just an example of how one person can change the world. Immediately, their own world, and then further out from there. And what I said to him, his name was Paul, I said, Paul, do you know what's happening beyond your company? He said, what do you mean? I said, those 300 people who work at your company go home. Right. And don't you think that they're showing up differently when they go home to their families or their friends or their social groups or their bridge club or their church group or their whatever it is? Don't you think they're showing up? And then he started crying again because he realized that he was changing the lives of thousands and thousands of people.
Right.
Who he'll never meet. But because the people he interacted with started to interact differently with people he didn't interact with, and then everybody started treating each other differently, that they're going back into the rest of their non-work lives, their personal lives, and showing up differently with their families, their children, their spouses, their partners, their friends. And because of one man, one person chose to show up differently and to let love radiate without concern for results, that countless people, their lives have been blessed and changed. And based on and from what you and I have been talking about, this story will never show up in the news.
Of course.
Right? Because this is a story of hope and positivity and light and love and oneness, that we're all connected.
Right.
This will never show up on CNN. It'll never be in USA Today or Newsweek or whatever it is. But this is what's really happening in the world. Not the wars and the corruption, and that stuff's happening too. But it's such a small part of what's happening in the world compared to these, countless acts of love and kindness.
Yes.
That this is what's really going on in the world, not the 6 o'clock news or MSN or CNBC or the New York Times or whatever. This is really what's going on in the world, and the world is waking up.
Yes, it is. The world is truly waking up. And I love a very important point to your story is without attachment. Just be loving. Just be kind. Without attachment. Without expectation. Just love for itself, for the sake of love alone. So true. So true. Well, Dr. Michael, can you please share with our listeners again how they can find you and keep in touch with you? Yes,
and you asked about vaccines today, and so I wrote a little book about it, more like a booklet, and I wanted to give it to all of your listeners for free, with my appreciation for their taking the time to listen to this interview. And so we created a web page for your listeners at my public website, which is michaelgaeta.com. So michaelgaeta.com is the public site. But if you go to michaelgaeta.com/awake, which is the name of your show, Awake to Oneness, if you go to michaelgaeta.com/awake, they can put in their information, and they'll get notified of my new articles and writings and events. But also, we're going to send them a little book I wrote about vaccines and choice, and so that they can learn more and share it with other people. It's we want people to share it. It's free.
Yes.
We'd love for them to get the word out and get informed. And so they can go, and if you have any listeners who are health professionals, there's information that they can get about my health professional trainings, which is mostly what I do these days. But we'd love to give that to them as a gift. And so they just go to michaelgaeta.com/awake.
Email it to me, and I'm going to make sure I have the link on all my pages, on my website, on the Blog Talk Radio page, and on my YouTube. So
and this is just for your listeners. Something we wanted to do for them.
Thank you.
We'd love to do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate that. This has been amazing over hour, which is fun.
Yeah, it sure has.
When you're the host of your own show, you can go over an hour if you want.
That's right.
I
did a show for 4 years, and that happens a lot.
Yes. Well, this has been amazing. And again, it's a podcast. Everyone will be able to, if they missed this live airing, just click on the same link and they can hear the replay.
Well, that's great. Wonderful. And if you do have health professionals who are listeners, they can go to cliniciansmastermind.com to learn about my 1-year health professional training in natural functional medicine. And then they can apply, and then I'll talk to them and see if it's a good fit for them. And health professionals can also go to autoimmunemasteryprogram.com, and I'll send you these links as well. Autoimmune Mastery Program is a 6-week health professional training in autoimmune disease, how to prevent and reverse the autoimmune process, which we're going to run again in September of 2017. And then the public page, which has my blog and my radio show archive and all of that, is at michaelgaeta.com. And then we're creating a page called michaelgaeta.com/awake, and then we'll send you the little book I wrote on vaccines.
Oh, thank you. One of the things you mentioned when you were doing the program for Humanities Team, you mentioned apple cider vinegar, organic apple cider vinegar. I take that every day with no
good for you.
I never get ill. Never. Everybody's sick around me, but I'm always healthy as a horse. But organic
wonderful.
Apple cider vinegar every day.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and preferably raw. An unpasteurized one would be a good thing.
Yes.
Oh, Bragg's is what I use myself.
Yes.
Bragg's is a very good one. That's one of the kind of really useful diet and lifestyle suggestions I recommend to people. I could take a minute and make some other suggestions that people might enjoy.
If
we have time.
We've got plenty of time. Definitely.
Yeah, so a tablespoon a day of a raw organic apple cider vinegar. 2 is great too.
I take 2. I put it in a shot glass and I drink it straight.
Oh, great. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, you can dilute it with some water if you like, or take it straight. What I recommend is people unplug their Wi-Fi at night. So just pull the plug on that, so you're sleeping without the Wi-Fi radiation in your house if you have Wi-Fi. Keep your cell phones out of your pocket. Carry it in a bag away from your body. It's really useful. Sea salt is a very good thing. A teaspoon a day of whatever your favorite sea salt is. I like Celtic sea salt, but any of the natural salts or sea salts are good. And then another great daily tonic is raw honey. And just a teaspoon a day, get a measuring teaspoon of raw honey is yummy and is like a tonic. It's like a health food. It's strengthening, has many benefits.
Well, I like to make organic lemonade first thing in the morning, but I make it with maple syrup grade B, organic maple syrup grade B.
Sure.
So I put a teaspoon or a tablespoon of that into, or I squeeze a half of organic lemon and make lemonade every morning. That's my first drink in the morning.
That's great. And the only upgrade to that, if you want, Carol, is to use raw honey, which is the ultimate sweetener instead of the maple syrup. Raw honey is the best sweetener in the world.
That's more nutritious than grade B?
Yes.
Maple syrup?
For sure. Yeah, honey.
All right, you just
if it's raw,
something.
honey is the ultimate nutrition, even compared to maple syrup. Maple syrup is a good second best sweetener.
Okay.
But raw honey has a lot more nutritional and energetic benefits and immune benefits as well.
Okay. Now you just converted me. I did not know that. I always thought maple syrup grade B, because grade B is hard to find. I can only find it in a health food store.
Yeah.
But, okay, you just converted me. Now I'm going to do the raw honey. Raw honey, okay.
Raw honey is a wonderful thing. Teaspoon of that a day, teaspoon of sea salt, tablespoon or more of raw organic apple cider vinegar like Eden or Bragg's. It's very, very good. Really wonderful. Simple things.
Simple things to keep you healthy.
That's right.
Prevention, for me, prevention is better than cure. Yes.
Yeah, it's much easier and cheaper to stay well than to get well, once you've been sick.
Yes, so true. Well, thank you, Dr. Michael. This has been so wonderful. I so appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I definitely am going to share that gift that you have for my listeners. They can find it on my blog page.
And if any of your listeners are interested in a personal health consultation, which we do with people around the country, and we've had actually some folks internationally too. We do that by phone. My associate and I, Dr. McCann's, we do phone and video remote, health consultations on diet and lifestyle and supplementation and herbal medicine that people want to use to get well and stay well naturally. So that all that you can find at michaelgaeta.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Michael. And you have a wonderful weekend. It's a beautiful weekend here in the Poconos, and I'm sure you're in Colorado. I'm sure it's
Boulder,
beautiful
Colorado,
Yes. Great. Well, thank you so much. You have a great weekend.
Thank you, Carol. You too.
We'll be keeping in touch. Okay.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Good night.
Bye-bye.